let us all do we can to build a better future.
And the fight for free speech. And there's going to be two videos of one of Tucker Carlson and one of Jimmy Dore. But the first video I'm going to play is something that was sent to me last night by my colleague Daniel Lupker, and it has to deal with how the FCC's Brendan Carr explains why he's accusing the Biden administration and President Biden of targeting Elon Musk. Now, look, I don't know what the future is for any of these social media platforms or the future for all of us. I hope we don't enter a grim, dark future where free speech is gone. Because remember, if once it's gone, it's not coming back. And there are the powers that be would I want to make sure that all of you just shut up and do what you're told. Now, Elon Musk, I'm not going to put him on the throne or on a pillar and say that he is a purveyor and fighter of free speech absolutism. I can agree with some aspects he's coming from, but however, I think we all know firsthand that there's no such thing as a perfect social media platform and that there are problems on X, formerly known as Twitter. I personally would call it Phoenix, but whatever. Gonna leave that for another day. But I do find it odd and very concerning that once again, the Biden-Harris administration is pushing forward with its initiative on dictating what can be on social media, who can run it, how is it going to be operated, because, hey, folks, we could trust the government, absolutely, and corporate media to be in favor of how the government's going to be running social media. What could possibly go wrong? Say it with me, folks. What could possibly go wrong? In fact, hey, let's have democracy in the chat. Type 1 if you trust any administration to run social media. Type 1 for, oh, yeah, absolutely. Type 2, no, I don't, because they're going to want everyone to shut up who's their political opponent. So I want to play this video here so that all of you can see it firsthand. And the overall concern of what this means for 2024, because this is going to be bigger than Elon Musk. This is going to be bigger than Twitter. This is going to be bigger than the presidency. This is about the future of how we are all going to be communicating. So let's play this video.
Let's bring in that dissenter, and that is Commissioner Brendan Carr. Commissioner Carr, thank you for coming on. Whatever people think of it, I thought it was brave and bold of what you did. People can disagree or agree with it. Why did you choose to do that? Because I'm sure you're taking a lot of, for lack of a better term, crap.
Well, look, I think there's a very clear pattern that has emerged. If you look just at the FCC, obviously where I work, we issued this decision that clawed back a $1 billion award that we issued first to Elon Musk back in 2020. And that decision really doesn't withstand scrutiny from the law or the facts or policy. And I'm not the first to notice it. It was actually the Wall Street Journal editorial board 2 months ago that went through and said, if you look at what the FTC is doing, the FAA, the DOJ, the Southern District of New York, even the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service launched an investigation because there were some quail eggs in a blue crab that were charred after a SpaceX launch. None of these individual decisions and the volume of them make any sense unless you refer back to last year when President Biden stood at the podium inside the White House and said that it has effectively a green light for agencies to, in the president's words, look into Elon Musk. And so I think all of this really can only be explained.
Now, I know how all of you feel about Elon Musk and billionaires and everything else, but this also opens up the Pandora's box for the rest of us to have a target on our back. Now, why is that? Well, remember when they deplatformed Donald Trump and Alex Jones? I still do remember a lot of people yelling at me and being upset with me for saying that they should not have been deplatformed or censored. And the problem is with them being censored is that I saw what happened to a lot of libertarian pages, activist pages, progressive pages, and how we here at Hardlands Media have been hit hard with the censorship as well. It's easy to sit back and say, well, I don't care what these agencies do to Elon Musk. Now, look, Elon Musk is not my best friend in the whole wide world, but I do see this as a problem for other people who run their own social media or either that have accounts on social media in which they too themselves can be investigated. And it takes a lot of courage to really put yourself out there to maybe challenge the administration. But however, this is Washington, D.C., because again, there's no such thing as a saint in Washington, D.C. It's one big cesspool. The FCC is going after Biden and accusing him targeting going after Elon Musk. So that also shows that there's weakness within the administration, and the agencies are not respecting this administration or this president. But let's continue on going forward.
Explained by reference to this broader pattern that's emerging across all sorts of regulatory agencies.
I think people who would question what you're saying, Commissioner Carr, would say, well, no, because number one, this decision, the FCC one, which has to do with low Earth orbits and Starlink, and it's a little bit wonky, was originally made before Musk bought Twitter. And two, the government is giving a lot of money to Starlink's parent, SpaceX.
Yeah, well, let's take this decision on its merits at the FCC. There was an original bureau-level decision in 2022, but this was the first commission-level decision, was not until just this week. And the decision doesn't withstand scrutiny. So what the FCC did was we awarded, again, $1 billion to Starlink to deliver high-speed internet service to something like 640,000 homes and businesses across a number of rural states. And what we said is that we don't think, the FCC, that Starlink technology is trustworthy. But that doesn't make sense, because if you look at other components of the federal government, they are entering into multi-million-dollar contracts right now with Starlink for the provision of high-speed internet service. And in fact, the real loser here isn't necessarily Elon Musk. He's going to be fine without this money, but it's those millions of Americans that were promised high-speed service because of this 2020 decision.
I'll pause it right here. We are a global superpower, and we are drastically behind the rest of the world. Now, I'm going to use this as a point of reference, and it's probably, again, technology does change and improve a lot. But when I was in Japan in 2020, I have to say that their internet infrastructure was by far more superior than anything I ever saw here in Chicago or anywhere else where I was here in the United States. This is how far behind we are. Now, this is my opinion. Now, I'm pretty sure maybe over time, some places have improved their internet, but, it's becoming a common theme where, again, we are intertwined with the internet. Most of our lives are interconnected with the internet and social media, and we need high-speed internet to get things done. And yet Starlink, which is something that could offer something very good for citizens here, it's being now controlled, or either that it's trying to be railroad, probably because there's a lot of politicians in DC that are upset that Elon Musk bought Twitter, now called X. Well, big deal. There's a lot of hurt feelings out there because there are some politicians and some people in certain political parties that feel that deplatforming and censorship does work. However, there's a concern here too, for he who controls the high-speed internet controls what you're allowed to see. You see what's happening here? It's about power and control. Now, do I trust Brendan Carr to be a saint in Washington, D.C. and maybe have our best interests at heart? No, because he's from D.C. and you can't trust anybody in D.C. It's a swamp bubble. It's a cesspool. There's no redeeming factors about Washington, D.C. No offense to anyone from Washington, D.C. who lives there, but look, listen. Chicago is the most corrupt city in the country, right? Add in Washington, D.C., then we become number 2. That's how bad D.C. is. Hey, it's the truth. I'm so sorry.
That are now left with effectively nothing. And look, if the federal government ever does come back and try to bring new high-speed service to them using fiber, it's going to cost order of magnitude more, probably $3 billion or more. So again, this is a decision that really doesn't make sense under the law.
Sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Carr. The chair, there's 5 commissioners. There's the chair, and then there's commissioners. The chair said that basically, I'm trying to get the exact quote here. The agency has a responsibility to be a good steward of limited public funds meant to expand rural access to broadband, not fund applicants that fail to meet basic program requirements. Did Starlink, in this case, fail to meet basic program requirements?
No, not at all. The very first program requirement that was scheduled to kick in.
That's not true.
For
That's
Starlink,
inaccurate.
That's right. Yeah, the first program requirement wasn't scheduled to kick in until 2025. And so the FCC said, because you're not meeting a 2025 build-out obligation today, in 2023, we're going to revoke the $1 billion. Again, there's really no explanation for this other than the fact that this fits a broader pattern that, again, the Wall Street Journal and others have already walked through, that the volume and the pace and the nature of the regulatory inquiries into Elon Musk either emerged or at least accelerated after his decision to purchase Twitter.
So that comment about failing to meet basic program requirements, what you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, is that, yeah, there are requirements in 2025. Maybe they don't meet them now, but there's no reason to believe they won't, because I'm trying to decide if that actual statement from the head of the FCC is itself some sort of like mis or disinformation.
Oh, disinformation. That wonderful word, disinformation. The whole idea of control and power. Now, here's my full-on analysis about this whole idea of the internet and what it should be in the future. This is just my opinion. I feel that it should be a public utility. It should be high speed. It should be available to all, because whether you like it or not, and no matter what kind of crap you're going to see on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever, folks, it's not going to go away, and we're stuck with it. Welcome to Black Mirror. I feel sorry for those writers. They won't be able to come up with anything creative because we're already doing it way ahead of them.
Yeah, look, again, we have program requirements that they weren't scheduled to have to meet until 2025, and the FCC was making a prediction about whether Starlink would or would not meet that. At the end of the day, they said Starlink is not a trustworthy technology. But again, that conclusion doesn't.
How's it not a trustworthy technology when, not to bring up a certain conflict, but there's a war kind of happened in Ukraine. And remember, way early on, Ukraine was using Starlink and everybody was so happy about it. They were jumping up for joy, jumping up like horny kangaroos. Don't worry, establishment. Just because you forgot doesn't mean old Kit Kat forgot.
Doesn't really make sense, because at this current moment, we have components of the federal government entering into multi-million-dollar contracts using Starlink for very important high-speed connections. And so I think this is one where, again, you have to refer back to this broader level of regulatory harassment, as the Wall Street Journal put it, to find a real explanation for.
That's true. Now, look, let's bring up journalism. Journalism and a crime. Is it a crime? Will it become a crime? I want to play this video of Tucker Carlson because I want to connect this to this attack that's happening that the Biden administration is doing towards Starlink. And probably because, again, there's a lot of people in D.C. that are still butthurt about what happened to Twitter. Now it's called X. Because censorship is getting all too real.
There is major concern in Washington at this hour that if democracy is allowed to function and the candidate who is leading in all the polls for president of the United States is allowed to win in 2024, we'll get fascism. He's going to throw his political opponents in prison, and that will change America forever. Democracy will die and will become an authoritarian republic. Not even a republic, a junta. Well, we don't have to wait, actually, because that's already happening, and it has been happening for at least 3 years, certainly since January 6th, 2021, a day in which we now know there were approximately 200 other undercover federal officers in the crowd. But it wasn't a setup. Don't say false flag. So what happened in the aftermath? Well, over 1,000 people were arrested, well over 1,000, in the largest manhunt the FBI has ever conducted. Almost all of them, almost every single one of them, had behaved peacefully at the demonstration, but many went to prison. But some went to prison without even doing anything wrong. And one of them, at least one of them, was an actual journalist, a salary-taking journalist, provably a journalist. And no one even accused him of going inside the Capitol that day. He was accused, however, of spreading, quote, disinformation about the election.
Disinformation, which is a perfect segue to our friend Jimmy Dore. Let's listen to what he says about the future of social media and why it needs to be viewed as a public utility, and why we also need to protect independent media and journalism as a whole, and why we should not be embracing censorship or deplatforming. Listen very carefully.
It should be treated as a public utility. That's what I'm saying. Just like you can't ban someone from using, AT&T can't take away your telephone if they don't like what you're saying on the telephone. Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter say shouldn't be allowed to take away your social media presence because they don't like what you're saying if you aren't breaking a law.
By the way, the government is doing it.
And if you are breaking a law, there's the government there to prosecute you for breaking a law. I don't need somebody at Twitter to go and enforce a law. There's already states attorneys. There's already just attorney generals. There's already sheriffs and police chiefs all across the country. I don't need Twitter and Mark Zuckerberg to act as a cop enforcing free speech rules.
They're not supposed to be able to. They're a publisher.
So
they're not a publisher.
So
you're right.
So so Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, they also enjoy special protection under the law. So if you're going to censor people, that makes you a publisher. And so if you're a publisher, now somebody, just like you can sue a book for defamatory shit, you don't sue the bookstore, you sue the publisher of the book. So now they're acting as the publisher and they're pretending they're the bookstore at the same time, so you can't sue them. So you can't sue them for defamatory shit on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but they are acting like a publisher. So you should. So they have a special cutout. It's called, I think, Section 220 or whatever that is. So now so they have special protection from the government. So they shouldn't have that, and they shouldn't be allowed to be publishers and a bookstore at the same time. So now I've explained this. I hope someone clips it so I don't have to have my editors clip it, and so that I can just tweet this at fucking dummies when they say stupid shit like I know they're already saying.
Precisely. However, we're not in that time. And we're getting into an era in which you have people who have a large following, or is it that influence with the powers that be, that want to dictate to you what you're allowed to see, what you're allowed to hear, and how you should interpret what the facts are. Or is it that they want to interpret it for you so that you can't come up with your own conclusion? Now, we here at Hard Lens Media believe that all of you, when we give an analysis or commentary to these stories, give our perspective and point of views, that all of you, in your own right, do your own research. I encourage all of you. I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum. It is your social responsibility, too, to also get informed and see different perspectives and opinions. I'm proud to say that we had a wide range of guests on our show in the past. And since Hard Lens Media was started, we've been told by others how to run our show or how we should do things. They didn't know who we were, so they want to dictate to us how we should run and how we should do the show, or who we should interview and who we should not interview. And it's interesting to point out that a lot of the people who would say to me, oh, you shouldn't interview the libertarians, or you shouldn't interview this group or that group, or you shouldn't talk to them. There was a time also when I was told, like, hey, I remember even saying this to this one person in particular, we've been told not to talk to you. You see, I'm not on board with censorship, and I don't like the idea of the government telling us that the internet should be in control of them. I don't like the idea of corporations having absolute power either, because, again, it's all across the spectrum. If you have corporations controlling everything, remember, corporations do control everything because they control our media and they own our politicians. This is what I mean when we have to do citizen ballot initiatives, okay? Just look up Tennessee. They have a public utility, fast broadband internet. The people own it. The people own it. Shout out to Roger Meadows. I want to continue back on with this clip from Tucker Carlson, just more about the future of journalism and what it means, because anything that happens to the internet or how social media is run, you better believe your last dollar, that's if we still have dollars, remember when money used to mean something, that journalism is also going to be on the chopping block. This is why we need independent media.
Which is now an imprisonable offense. His name is Owen Schroyer. He spent years as an InfoWar host. He just spent 47 days in federal prison for, listen carefully, a misdemeanor. Has anyone ever gone to federal prison for a misdemeanor? We can't find anyone. By the way, he was kept in solitary confinement for most of that time. He is out of prison, still in probation. He joins us now. Owen Schroyer, thanks so much for joining us. I hope
it's an honor to be here, Tucker.
Well, it's an honor to have you, and welcome back from prison. I ad-libbed most of that intro, so I want to make sure I didn't misstate any of the facts of your case. It just almost defies imagination. Tell us, in your words, why you were sent to federal prison.
Well, January 6th is obviously the hook that the Department of Justice used to put me in prison, even though my charge still was a misdemeanor charge. I think it's worth laying the breadcrumbs for this, because really the persecution that I've dealt with as a journalist and a talk show host dates back to actually 2019, where you may recall the Democrats were holding their impeachment sham against Donald Trump, and I happened to stand up during Nadler's introduction of the impeachment, and I told them that it was fraudulent, that we the people elected Trump, and Trump was innocent. The whole exchange lasted longer than 60 seconds.
From counsels for the majority and the minority of this order in the committee room.
The cops escorted me out of the building. I complied, no problems. And normally that would be that, Tucker. In fact, this is actually pretty commonplace for the Capitol. I'm sure you've seen it many times yourself. One David Hogg has done this. We've seen people storm into Kevin McCarthy's office. We see the pro-Palestinian protesters storming into the Capitol. We've seen the pro-abortion people. I can go on, but for the sake of time, I'll stop with that short list. Very commonplace for people to go into the Capitol. Now, normally what happens is the Capitol Police will detain you, escort you out of the building, and usually just shuffle you on their way. Well, in 2019, after I had disrupted the impeachment sham hearing, which I would still argue is a First Amendment right to redress your grievances with the government, somebody got on the walkie-talkie of the Capitol police officer just as he was about to release me and said, no, not so fast. We're not going to treat Owen Schroyer like the other 99% of people that go into the Capitol and get escorted out and detained. We're going to go ahead and charge and arrest him. So that was the first time I was politically persecuted.
All right. Are the red flags waving? Do you not see the danger of what's happening? Now, I get it. I understand it. There are people who are easily triggered. There are people who are upset when maybe another opinion is voiced out. But this impacts us all. When we can't voice out and call out the hypocrisy of our own lawmakers and the policies which they are implementing over us, that means so much more of our rights, if we still have any left, can evaporate into thin air. And then that's it. It's gone. It's not coming back. Now, I'm not a fan of the current environment of social media and how it's in control of big corporations, big tech, and so much more. But I'm also not a fan of the consolidation of power that these politicians are doing, in which they are getting everyone to fall in line. Now, Elon Musk is probably not the best heavyweight champion in the world for free speech and internet accessibility, but I also don't like how the government is going after him. I also don't like how you have corporate media trying to silence people like Tucker Carlson, or how many people are cheerleading for people to be deplatformed and censored, because it's not only the right or libertarians, it is progressives and independents and activists. A lot of us are being censored and silenced because we're calling out the fact that we have lawmakers that are inherently corrupt, that have made a huge amount of profit with insider trading, and still are connected with the powers that be at Wall Street, big banks, the corporations, big pharma, all of them. We want to know why things are messed up as they are. It's because the whole system is broad. The whole system is corrupt, and we don't have true representation. And the American people, unfortunately, even though some of us are awakening, and we should be awakening, a lot of us are still blind, deaf, and dumb to the fact that we're being lied to. We're being ignored. We're being stepped on. We're being oppressed. This is the environment we have. And it can't remain this way. It's not sustainable. Not only that, for our own mental health, because we only can be lied to for so long. No wonder the trust for all these institutions are evaporating. And when you have journalists or people calling out politicians that are being removed or being prosecuted, arrested, people like Julian A., all the way there, somewhere in the European hemisphere, in the Belmarsh prison, his crime, embarrassing the top 1%ers, the governments that be, the people that are in charge. That's his crime. And he's in a maximum security prison. How is that even possible? His crime was telling the truth. All those moral lessons that you learned on Sesame Street. Oh, you got to tell the truth. Nah, not in this day and age. You go to jail. If you lie, well, then you're a saint. Here's some milk and cookies for you.
A month later, inside that same Capitol building, there were a group of, say, 40 or 50 anti-Trump protesters having a demonstration in the Capitol. Well, I decided to just show the double standard in this country, to go back to the exact same spot that 40 to 50 anti-Trump protesters were in the Capitol. I went to the exact same spot. I put a tape over my mouth that said censored because I had been banned off all mainstream media, social media platforms. And I was arrested for that and spent 36 hours in a DC gulag for that. Eventually, when that reached the judge's docket, he just completely tossed it out. But I think it's worth building to this point, Tucker, because people need to know that this discrimination and persecution against myself, but probably more importantly, just against journalists, has been going on for a long time. So bring us to January 6th. As you said, I was there covering the event as a journalist. And despite the mainstream media and left-wing media reports that are completely wrong, claiming that I was in violation of a probation from 2019 just by being there, that is completely inaccurate. I was not in violation of my probation, and I was there that day as a journalist. Well, after everything goes down that day, and myself and the team that I was with, which is in their sentencing memo, they admit we tried to stop people from going into the Capitol. We tried to discourage people from being on Capitol grounds. We even tried to work with police to stop the whole event from happening. This is all on record. The government, the Department of Justice, the judge, the prosecuting attorneys are all well aware of this. It all came up in my sentencing memo, and yet they still decided to sentence me to 60 days in jail, which you reported I did only serve 47. They wanted to hit me with 120 days in
120 days. They wanted to hit him that. With that, they wanted to do that to him. You know, I want to say things are going to get better, and I have to say I don't wish this on anybody at all. I don't care where you stand politically or what generation you're freaking part of. The fact that we can't voice out, the fact that we can't speak out, the fact that we can't have the right to protest, because we see protests happening, but I mean, can we really vocally speak out? We have politicians telling us to hush, to be quiet. Don't challenge them. Just trust everything, because remember, their go-to thing right now is we gotta be afraid of fascism and Trump, because once Trump's in office, it's going to get worse. It doesn't matter if there's a Republican or Democrat in Washington, D.C. We're all screwed in the end unless we start using our own power. Citizen ballot initiatives. If you live in a citizen ballot initiative state, you fight to make sure it stays that way. And if you don't live in a citizen ballot initiative state, then you fight tooth and nail to make it so. Don't give up.
in jail. And so I'm lucky that I really only got away with 47. Unfortunately, I had to serve, as you said, the majority of that in lockdown. But here's another issue aside from the attack on free speech. The incentive right now from the Department of Justice is not justice, Tucker. The incentive from U.S. attorneys is convictions, and the incentive from the judge is imprisonment. Justice never seems to enter the equation here at all, and I'm perfectly an example of that. Everybody knows I didn't belong in prison. Even when I was indicted by the FBI, a magistrate judge, Farouk in D.C., issued a motion to the DOJ saying, hey, wait a second, you violated the law potentially here, and they did. When they indicted me as a journalist, Barack Obama signed legislation that you have to go through special protocols and procedures when you're going to charge a journalist. They didn't do any of that. What did they do with the judge's memo saying that you violated the law? They said, we don't care. We're charging Schroyer anyway. We don't have to follow the rules.
I want to give the final note to somebody who actually donated a YouTube super chat. Thank you so much for your generosity. John Michael, you wrote, anyone who goes against the elite narrative will be censored regardless if you're on the right or on the left. It doesn't matter. If you go up against the establishment narrative, you're the villain. You're the bad guy. When I said that Trump was going to potentially win in 2016, I've had people say, oh, well, you're a Trump supporter. When I said I was going to vote third party, people said, oh, you're helping out Trump. You should be deplatformed, censored, silenced, remove yourself. How dare you speak? You don't deserve a platform. How dare you? You don't deserve to run your own show. How dare you? Well, you have the right to say that to me. I think you're wrong. You're incorrect, but you have the right to say that. But see, the thing is, for those who embrace censorship, be ready for the day when you speak out and there's nobody else to agree. Yeah, I agree with your perspective. You should speak out against that. You should call out, use your voice. These politicians, these people in power want to silence our voice. They want to control the internet. They want to control our right to speak. They want to control our right to protest and rally. They want to control how we want to vote and tell us what to think. We are not machines. And it's just this is bigger than any other social media show or anything on the internet, independent media. This is bigger than anything altogether. This is our collective right of speaking out and using this power of the internet as our tool. The establishment wants to take that away from you. And if we don't remain vocal and vigilant, it will be gone. And I won't make the promise that someday it'll come back, because it probably won't. That's how fragile free speech is. And it must be strengthened by the will of the people.